Jesus. Ooh, oh, I got a bag of chili heat in the bowl and some paper towel to wipe off our hands. I'm cross-legged like 11 years old on the carpet pocket opposite ends. Well, my mind, I'm waking up beside you in a vacuum void of space and time. Instead, I'm rolling joints with zero weed in a futile effort to delay goodbye. Could be wrong to invite you overnight. So what I know, so we'll talk and sit tight and make pretend that we're good friends. Welcome to Close Listening. So I'm Zach Morgenstern. I'm joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And on this episode, as I think you can tell, we're doing something different. So far I've used this channel to share my music with you and also talk about either some favorite albums or some albums that I'm exploring. But now I really want to dive into what I see as the goal of being a musician. And I think it's this search for this utopian community of music, of rock and roll. I like to imagine when I go to the right open mic that I'm back in the days of Greenwich Village and Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes and Tom Paxton and so many others are playing there and all their music matters and they all care about each other's music and they're all inspired by it. So that said, I'm very excited about my first guest. His name is Oscar Lewis, though it's a bit weird for me to call him that. I'll get into that into the interview. But he's someone who's made some really well-produced, really creative and genre-fusing songs. And he's also someone I went to high school with. And I love that dichotomy. When I'm talking to him, I both feel like I'm reacquainting with an old friend, which I am, and also that I'm talking to a budding star, which I also am. And it's funny because he wasn't just some guy in high school. He was actually the student council president, and I was involved in his administration. I was the treasurer. And though I believe we're both outside of political office right now, you can certainly see why Oscar was able to make a winning speech back in the day, and I'm sure he would do great work if he wanted to do something like that again. So without further ado, here's Oscar Lewis. Well, I'm joined today by singer, songwriter, rapper Oscar Lewis, and I think off the bat to clarify, you don't actually call Oscar Lewis a stage name, you call it a project. Can you clarify a bit what that means?
Yes, totally. So my real name is Oren Lefkowitz, and that is the name that everyone around me refers to me as. But when I was starting this project with a friend of mine in New York named Steven Shapiro, I've never been like in love with my name, but also I was kind of trying to explore themes that are close to me, like Jewishness and trauma and anti-Semitism and queerness and shame, and just thinking about that and thinking about what that means in relation to the idea of a stage name. And part of the research I did, led me to the conclusion that part of the reason why stage names exist at all is because of some like a large group of Jewish people from like Eastern Europe and Russia who came to the United States in like the early 1900s and had outlandishly Jewish European sounding names, and so they would think of like the whitest thing they could think of and make that their stage name. And so I thought that was kind of funny. And I didn't want to change my name, but I was thinking just as a thought experiment, like what would my name have been? Because I would have probably changed it if I was trying to make it in Hollywood in like 1920 or 1930 or something. And my collaborator, Steven, said, well, maybe instead of Oren, it would be Oscar. And I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Like Oscar Wilde, Oscar Peterson are like two of my just heroes. What would it be instead of my last name? He said, well, maybe it would be like Lewis instead of Lefkowitz. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And he was really into it because he thought it like had like a ring to it. And I was like less sure. And so I was like, well, we should look it up and see if there's anyone named Oscar Lewis out there, like a bedroom pop artist that's popping off or something. And so we looked it up, and what came up was this anthropologist, a Wikipedia article for an anthropologist who died in 1950, named Oscar Lewis. And the first thing it says in the article is Oscar Lewis, born Lefkowitz. which is my last name. I was like,
Very convenient.
I was like, that's pretty weird. And
Right. Did you find out if that was like an Ellis Island name or something?
so no, he was born in the United States, had the name Yeheshkel Lefkowitz. His dad was a rabbi, and it was actually when he was 25, he wanted to go to Columbia for anthropology, and I think just to help with not being, treated with discrimination, he just
Right.
decided to change his name to that. So I thought that was pretty, interesting, and just kind of validated the thought experiment itself. And I was like, yeah, that's the kind of thing I want to explore. And I appreciate you asking, because I wanted to use this name as an opportunity to like kind of talk about that in general.
Right. And it's interesting for me because I know of that idea, but I'm not sure how many of the actual examples that I would know of are, actually people really trying to avoid anti-Semitism, and how much of it is just homage. Like, I wonder with someone like John Stewart, who was born John Leibovitz, but he's never hiding that he's Jewish. So it's just
Yeah,
an interesting
I
history.
I think in that particular example, I think that it was because he was estranged from his dad, whose like last name was
Okay.
Leibowitz. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that it might not be like super overt. I think maybe like I think there's like, even if it is an homage, I think there is this, for some reason it's all the Jewish last names that get switched.
Right.
Like some non-Jewish people switch it, but like all the Jewish ones get switched.
Yeah.
And I think that even if we don't admit it to ourselves, like there is like an element of like hiding, that is like just still prevalent. So like an example of like Isser Danielovich,
Hmm.
who became Kirk Douglas, is like a prominent example. Or like even like in the 60s, like rock artists, people like Carol Klein became Carol King, and famously Robert Zimmerman became Bob Dylan. And yeah.
Right. Though the example I like to throw back there, Neil Diamond says, and I don't think this is a joke, that he considered using Noah Kaminsky as a stage name. So Neil Diamond being his birth name, and he, for whatever reason, wanted to go the opposite direction. But yeah, no,
That's
that's a
funny.
great answer. And I thought we could jump into our next question, which is about genre. So back when I really knew you, which I guess is a decade ago now, you were coming up as a rapper. I was starting to be a singer-songwriter, and I would have thought of us as being in completely different musical worlds. Now, when I listen to these Oscar Lewis songs, you sometimes go into rap mode, but you really are a singer-songwriter. You've completely merged these worlds. Could you talk about that musical development?
For sure. First of all, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. But I think that, so I was in a group before like Oscar Lewis started in like 2019, probably like February 2019. And before that, I was in an R&B hip hop group, and for like a couple of years, called Ad Hoc. And I think in that project, I started trying to merge singing and rapping. And so like it was like the first beginnings of it, but it was very much in like the R&B space.
Right.
And so there was like the beginnings of this like sort of hybrid experiment thing. But with this project, I think when like I started it with my friend, I wanted very much for it to be like intentional with like what the influences, and I wanted it to like represent me more than the other things I'd done in the past. And I grew up on Beatles and Carole King, and honestly like Sarah McLachlan and Sheryl Crow and
Right.
Simon and Garfunkel and Pink Floyd. And I also grew up on like Outkast and Kanye. And yeah, I think I just wanted to just bring all that in to what I was doing and just have it. And I had like an inkling that like, lots of people out there love all that kind of music,
Right.
but you don't hear that kind of music thrown in together all that often. And so I felt like that was like my goal and my crux to bear. And yeah. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I've
It's
been
still in
thinking
motion.
about, because there's all these musical genres that I think are made up. Like, there are, country artists are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just because they have a Southern accent or something. Like, to me, it's the same music. But I do think that there is maybe this qualitative gap between rock and rap, and that's embodied in the sense that rap artists almost never do covers, for instance. It just feels like, that's one sign that they view it as a completely different art form. So like, Oh, go ahead.
If I can respond to that, I think that's interesting. I think there's like a hip hop version of covers, which is like when they interpolate like a famous song, old song is like interpolated
Right.
into a rap song. There's like a lot of examples of that, but the Fugees' "Ready or Not," which I'm not sure if you know that song, but it's like one of my favorite songs of all time.
Is it the one that's based on Islands in the Stream?
No, that's Ghetto Superstar, but that's
Okay.
also a great example. Yeah. No, Ready or Not. Well, first of all, it like samples Enya, which is just interesting,
Mm.
and then the chorus borrows from, I think the band is called the Delphonics, and it's like this like kind of like old '60s soul song that's like "Ready or Not, here I come, you know how,"
Right.
and then like it just kind of flipped into this very smooth like '90s R&B hip hop vibe by the Fugees, and so I don't know, it's not a cover, but it's kind of like
Yeah.
yeah.
Though I guess what I'm getting at is covering your contemporaries. So, James
Mm,
Taylor records, he was mostly a singer-songwriter, but there'd be Marvin Gaye, there'd be Buddy Holly, and certainly Carole King on there, for instance. You don't see rappers just saying, this is the most poignant rap song I heard on the radio today, so here's me doing my version of it.
right. No, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and I think part of that actually is because I think in rap there is like these. I think the way that it like came to be hip hop, there was like it was like out of like battling and like writing as this very like sacred thing that like you want it to be like the best in the world at, right? Is I
Right.
it's my read on it, and so I think to like cover someone else's song and like pay homage and I especially a contemporary, I think is like yeah, it goes against like the rules of the genre. So I think you're hitting on something. I think it's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So to go on another track, so I watched your interview on this other channel called Mod Mostly, and you're talking about your song Open there. And a sort of bigger thing it drew my attention to is there's a lot of intentionality in your song. So that song Open was about a very specific experience, which, if I hadn't watched that video, I wouldn't have known anything about. So I wonder when you're creating, how do you find that balance between saying what you want to exactly say and creating melody, creating a poetic song?
Good question. I for me, honestly, the melody is always like first, and so I'll sit down, you know, once a day or a couple times a day or a couple times a week or whatever it looks like, and just be at the piano and just be kind of just jamming new chord progressions and new melodies. And so I kind of like do that often enough that I have like ideas that I like kind of stacked up in my like voice notes for like a long time. And and then when it comes time to like turning something properly into a song, it's kind of like I can like pull from these ideas, this like a little library, and kind of see what fits. And sometimes I'll have an experience like what happened in Open, and say to myself, oh, this is that I need to find like a vibe that fits that. Or actually, and I can't remember exactly what I said in the interview, but to my memory of how Open happened, it was really like uh, I like while I was jamming, like the na in the Open, like that kind of expression,
Right.
like kind of like happened, and I was just trying to figure out what I meant by it. And at first, I was gonna write, oh, I should write a story, a fictional story about like these two men who are married to women that are having an affair. It started sounding like Brokeback Mountain, and then which is like a nice story. But I think that I in a situation like that, I'm like, well, it'll just feel realer if I just tell my actual story. Like I have a story to tell, so like I should just tell that story. I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure if it totally
Yeah,
did.
well, what was interesting for me is I opened this video and the host, they open by, they're speaking almost in like queer theory language and attributing this very specific meaning to your song, which I hadn't seen just by looking at the lyrics. And also like, I don't believe you were out in high school. So I was like, whoa, that
Mhm.
was all there.
Yeah.
And so you obviously, you probably owe something to interviews like that where they're saying this is specifically what the song is about. And I just wonder whether, it's a challenge. Do you want to be more specific in your lyrics and you can't because it doesn't fit melody? Do you know what I
Mm,
mean?
yeah, totally. Hmm. I think that. I don't think I'm trying. I think that there runs a risk of being like too specific. I think that what I like about open is that, I want people to get my story from it for sure. But what's more important is that they feel an emotion that resonates with them in their own life. And I think music is this weird thing where you almost want to accomplish both, or at least one of them, you know. And I think I'd rather it just resonate with people. And I think you have to put enough of yourself and enough of like an authentic emotion and story into it for it to like reach people's hearts. Sorry to be cheesy about it, but
No.
like, I think that if it's like, I don't think there's any problem with being too specific, but yeah, I would rather people, because I think that a song like Open, which is really, which for me is about being, you know, queer in a relationship with a man, and we're traveling in like an area we don't know if it's safe, and then, I'm like hiding, I'm like trying not to show our love, and he's insulted, and it's this dynamic because of homophobia. I think that straight people, not that I'm trying to appeal to straight people, but like I think that there's shame involved and like embarrassment of your partner involved with people who aren't queer. And so I hope that because I didn't say anything like super specific to like, this is a gay song, you know,
Right.
yeah, they can feel
Yeah.
that.
The other thing I was wondering with that song, so you say it's about, you generally feel safe in cities like Montreal or New York, but you were in a gas station in not a city. And, ever since the election of Trump, which I guess is over now, there was a lot of discourse about checking various kinds of bigotry in our communities, specifically racism. And what always bothered me about those conversations is I felt like, well, maybe I have friends who say slightly problematic things, but they're not the ones who are at risk of voting for Trump. Those people are in a completely different space, somewhere rural where I'm not communicating with them at all. So yeah, I wonder what thought process went into specifically talking about being in this other community where maybe politics and social consciousness are in a completely different space.
Right. I think that for sure there's homophobia in cities, and I think it might take on like a different, I honestly think that probably my view of like why I'm so afraid in a rural space. I hope I'm partly answering the question.
Oh yeah, no, whatever you
Is
mean.
yeah, I think that it's partly because I'm like paranoid, and because I have my own biases against rural people, because I'm born in a city and I live in a city, and I'm, like I'm a city mouse through and through. And so like I think that I have my own prejudices against what rural people are like. I have no idea if they're homophobic. I mean, they very well could be, but like nothing. I mean, not much has really happened to me in those
Right.
spaces, and frankly, I've hardly spent any time there. I don't even know. I know that they vote more conservative, but does it mean they're gonna like violently attack a gay person, a gay couple? Like, I have no idea. So I think
Yeah.
it's my ignorance and my paranoia fueled by ignorance.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess that's just coming straight from the heart. But I think it's important we be able to think in those nuanced terms as we try and address these problems. And I think there are various political actors who only want to spin things one way. And so you're beginning to ask the important questions, I guess is what I'm saying. So one of the things I admired about you back in the days, I thought you could really go between different kinds of social spaces. So I mentioned in my introduction that you are a student council president, and I think that's attributable to the fact that you both could speak the language of the masses of the school to speak, but you're also a uniquely intelligent and compassionate person. Like you could be the nerd, you could be the jock, whatever appropriate high school terminology. And I think that social bilingualism comes out in your lyrics. I'm just gonna read something here. I've been thinking all about my tendency for overthinking about dumb shit so heavily. What did he mean when he said especially turning simplicity into complexity? So you're both being casual here. You're swearing. You're using some smaller words, but you're also clearly being very philosophical. So is this just your natural voice, or is this a character you're trying to develop?
First of all, that's a kind little, you know, stanza. um, I, uh, I, I think that I don't think it's necessarily a character. I think maybe we over time, especially when you're like writing songs, you start to like realize what your own character is, and maybe it's like a slightly more exaggerated version of yourself, or like what you think people perceive you as. Um, I think I think that what's funny is I was actually thinking about this in the shower earlier today. I like look up to Leonard Cohen and Bob Dylan a lot, and
Right.
I think that there are these like, especially I think, well, honestly, it just differs. I was about to say especially Leonard Cohen, but then like sometimes it's especially Bob Dylan. I'm sure you have similar things where it's like you're a bigger fan of one person, if it's
One
like
day, yeah.
an odd number day. But I think that I like look at like someone like Leonard Cohen who has this like beautiful poetic, like super. I don't know. It's like complicated, and you have to like dig into it and really like grasp a lot from it. And I look at that and I don't think I can do that nearly as well as someone like he can. And I was thinking in the shower, and I sometimes I'll let that get me down, but I was thinking in the shower today that maybe actually like my writing style or what I am capable of is actually better suited for like today, and that like people don't actually want necessarily all of that. They want something a bit simpler, and so maybe it's a good fit. So I don't think I think that I'm doing my best to like express the ideas that are in my head, and I honestly sometimes wish I could like speak in a more complicated language and write it out, but often what's funny is often I'll like write something. I'll be like, oh, that's way too simple. That's way too overt. Like I have to like complicate this somehow. And then I show it to people and they have no idea what I'm talking about. It's almost
Right.
useless. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think about that on the musical composition side too. Like sometimes I'll read something about, how good Prince was at playing guitar, and I'll be jealous of that, and I'll think I want to work more on being a lead guitarist and not just playing the basic chords. But then the songs keep coming in my head, and they keep coming in 4-chord form, and I'm like, okay, am I going to force these to be something fancy just so I count as accomplished when the art is already there? And there's nothing inherently wrong with simplicity.
Right. And in fact, that's a lot of people want that. And not that you should like base your art on what people want, but it's nice to have people you kind of art is it's like music is like communication, and it's like it suck to just like be communicating with a wall all the time. You want people to receive it in some way, and yeah.
For sure. I mean, that said, people like clarity, and sometimes they like mysteriousness and randomness. So I thought for my last question, you could tell me about what I think is my favorite song of yours, Animatronic Jesus. There's a great music video with a lot going on. Just tell me as much as you can about that song.
I'm so glad that's your favorite song. That basically, I was retelling a story of an encounter with someone some years ago, a person who was in a relationship, who I had some history with, and we were hanging out, and I knew that they were in a relationship, and we just we kind of just hung out late into the night, and and if there wasn't a relationship, there might have been some romantic thing, but
Right.
that kind of couldn't happen because of the circumstances. And I kind of had this like sort of like fake, not fake, but like sort of fake smile about the whole situation the whole time, because it's kind of a bummer. Um, and I just kind of thought of like this like sort of like pretend like benevolent character kind of smiling, and somehow I imagine animatronic Jesus, this just like kind of like creepy, like fake smiling, like,
Right.
Messiah, just pretending to be all loving when really like they're totally pissed about the
So
situation.
this is completely in your head. This is not like some figure from like Honest Ed's or whatever.
No. Yeah, I don't know. And somehow I came up with the phrase animatronic Jesus. Looked it up, found like a picture of like some in Brazil or Argentina, there was an actual like Jesus theme park with an animatronic
Amazing.
Jesus. And it looked exactly the way that I wanted it to. And it also is important to the story is I wrote that song I think like the first week of lockdown of
Oh,
the pandemic. And I think I had just like played probably the biggest show I'd ever played was in New York at a place called Rough Trade right before the pandemic. Um, and and then like the pandemic hit, and kind of like everyone's momentum, everyone's lives is just kind of like at this stand still. And I was like, yeah, I gotta keep doing stuff somehow. And so we like me and Shaps made that song really quickly, filmed that like really shisty video. My friend Jonathan put it together. And so that was like the fastest I've ever made a song and like released it, recorded it on my mic at home. So the
Yeah, well,
fact that
what
that's
I
your
liked,
favorite song is wild. It's funny.
yeah, what I liked about the video is, well, I think for me, I like songs more when I can imagine myself doing a version of them. So I think the reason why I've never gotten into rap is precisely because people don't do covers of rap songs, whereas I listen to, John Denver or James Taylor or whatever, and I'm thinking, okay, how fast can I learn this song to play it at an open mic? So when I watch the video for Animatronic Jesus, at times I can tell you have an experienced team behind you who knows how to do stuff, at least a little bit with the animation bits. At other times, I see you playing with the lion and the zebra, and I thought I could do that. That's kind of my sensibility too. So having that mix between talent and relatability, I think, is just really great. Okay, so do you wanna show us one of your songs?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. I'll lie and I'll say one more question then. So you talked about how. Yeah, well, in the Mod Mostly interview, you had really nuanced thoughts about the song. You both don't want to be promoting cigarettes, and you also acknowledge it's part of people's lives, and you don't want to have an all negative song about it. And you also said that it was something that surprised you that it came into your life. And I remember, being bombarded with anti-cigarette propaganda in elementary school. It drove me crazy how much our fourth grade teacher talked about it. So, and I've never started smoking, but towards the end of undergrad, I started watching French New Wave movies, and there are all these artistic shots of cigarette smoke floating through the air in black and white. So I don't know, for you, was the decision to start smoking at all an artistic one? And then does it feel like an accumulation of this to get to write this song?
Um, I don't think I think I probably partly got into it because it was so fun to like go onto your balcony and like while you're trying to write and like smoke and just look at the stars or like the one star in the sky because you live in Montreal, but yeah, I think that and then it becomes social and all the artistic people around you are smoking but what's nice is that I think I've realized recently that you don't actually need it to be good at anything, and it's like such a destructive thing that it's, and I'm not trying to be part of that propaganda, but that's what I would tell kids is like, you think it looks cool, but like, you really don't actually need it to be cool at all. And like, in fact, at a certain age, people think it's like kind of like, and I'm not trying to judge anybody, but I felt that like people think I'm pathetic for still smoking, and like people don't think you're cooler for smoking. And yeah. But that being said, this song that I'm going to play is about how badly one wants cigarettes when they're trying to quit. And
Awesome.
Quest to bum one off the street. Yeah.
All right.
I burned away inside of a living room. Old news ashtray spilled on the rug again. I paced around, speaking erratically. White flag, I'm home. Do you mind if I could smoke one, please? I wanna put it in the air. I told my fan that I was off of these, but no. Oh, would it be cool if I had one more, please? Cause only one just isn't fair. I spend my day out on the balcony like smoke. Oh. Little clinic for a simple gimme, even a single digit. Since you said you quit it, would be mad pathetic to buy pack already, but you gotta find a way to smoke. Lap the block, go by the office building. God is willing, there's a copper chilling. It's a groupie guy, there's a poop and dot. Don't engage the crew, pick one dude. Excuse me, pal. I didn't mean to pull up unannounced, but I was in the scramble of the house, and I forgot my cameras on the couch, bottom of the barrel, but it all checks out. Look him in the eyes, stand with swell. It could help. Desperation doesn't sell. Show some teeth, make up my mind in a minute. I'ma get it in line in a minute. This wasn't the path I envisioned. I've been trying to decide what's the difference. I'ma make up my mind in a minute. I'ma get it in line in a minute. This wasn't the path I envisioned. And but I go. Do you mind if I can smoke one, please? I wanna put it in the air. I told my fan that I was out for these, but no. Oh, oh, oh. Would it be cool if I had one more, please? Cause only one just isn't fair. I spend my day out on the balcony like smoke. Oh, oh, oh. I burn away inside of a old ashtray spilled on the
Well, Oscar Lewis, thank you for joining us.
Zach, thank you for having me. Super fun.